The blood ran red as sunset across Tucker Alderson's shirt as he rode into Willow Springs, three trembling girls clinging to his broad back. The townsfolk stood frozen on the dusty main street, the same street that had seen those girls taken just 2 days prior. Their tear-stained faces told a story no one wanted to hear, but everyone knew they soon would. Willow Springs, Colorado, 1876. The railroad had brought prosperity, and prosperity had brought trouble. The Blackwater Gang had terrorized the region for months, but taking the girls had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "Doctor," Tucker shouted, his voice hoarse from the mountain air and the violence that had consumed the last 48 hours. "Get the doctor." The three girls slid down from his horse, their dresses torn and dirty, but mercifully intact in all the ways that mattered most. The youngest, barely 18, collapsed into her mother's arms. The other two, sisters from the Taylor family, stood unsteadily as their father pushed through the gathering crowd. Tucker Alderson remained mounted, his Winchester rifle resting across his lap. The blood on his shirt wasn't his, not most of it anyway. "The Blackwater boys won't be troubling anyone again," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent street. Among the onlookers stood Zara Thomas, the schoolteacher who had arrived from Boston just 6 months earlier. Her eyes met Tucker's, and something passed between them, something neither expected nor sought, but unmistakable all the same. "Miss Thomas," Tucker tipped his hat slightly, "I believe these girls might need some tending to." Zara stepped forward, her practical brown skirt swishing in the dust. "Of course, Mr. Alderson." She reached for the Taylor girls, who leaned into her embrace. "Come along now, we'll get you cleaned up and safe." As she guided the girls toward the boarding house where she lived, she glanced back over her shoulder. Tucker Alderson was still watching her, his face grim beneath the shadow of his hat. The blood on his shirt had begun to dry, turning from bright crimson to rust brown. It wasn't the first time their paths had crossed, but something told Zara that this time would be different. This time would matter. The town doctor, a harried man named Cooper, rushed past her. "Alderson, you look like hell. Get down off that horse before you fall down." Tucker shook his head. "Tend to the girls first, Doc. I've got more riding to do." Zara paused, the Taylor girls still clinging to her sides. "More riding? Surely not today, Mr. Alderson. The law needs to know what happened up in those hills," Tucker replied, his voice softer now, meant only for her ears as she stood near his horse. "Sheriff should know where to find what's left of the Blackwater Gang." "And then?" she asked, surprising herself with the boldness of the question. Tucker's weathered face softened just slightly. "Then I come back, Miss Thomas." Zara nodded, a strange relief washing over her. She'd known Tucker Alderson only in passing, the quiet rancher who sometimes came to town for supplies, who kept to himself but always nodded politely when they crossed paths. She knew little about him beyond rumors and whispers. A former soldier. A man who'd lost his family years ago. A man who knew the mountains better than most knew their own homes. "See that you do," she said simply, then continued guiding the traumatized girls toward safety. Tucker watched her go, struck by the calm strength in her slender frame. Then he turned his horse toward the sheriff's office, leaving a trail of dark droplets in the dust behind him. The story of what happened in those hills would come out soon enough. The story of what would happen after that remained to be written. Zara settled the Taylor girls in the small parlor of Mrs. Hollister's boarding house. The elderly widow brought hot water, clean cloths, and her special chamomile tea that she insisted could cure everything from headaches to heartbreak. "Those poor dears, Mrs. Hollister whispered to Zara as they stood in the doorway, watching the sisters cling to each other on the worn settee. "What do you suppose happened up there?" "I don't know," Zara replied honestly, "and I won't ask unless they want to tell us." The younger sister, Emma, had tear-stained cheeks but no visible injuries. Her older sister, Kate, had scratches on her arms and a bruise forming along her jaw. Both girls stared blankly at the floral carpet, as if seeing something else entirely. "That Alderson man, Mrs. Hollister continued, her voice low. "They say he tracked the Blackwater Gang all by himself, 3 against 1. 4, Kate Taylor said suddenly, her voice hollow. "There were 4 of them." Both women turned to look at the girl. 4 men who took us, Kate continued, her hands trembling around the teacup. Mr. Alderson killed them all. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. He came like a ghost, Emma whispered. In the night. We heard shooting and then he was there, cutting our ropes. Kate nodded. The last one tried to use me as a shield. Mr. Alderson shot him right over my shoulder. She touched the bruise on her jaw. That's how I got this. When the man fell, he knocked me down. Zara moved to sit beside the girls. You're safe now, that's what matters. He didn't even know us, Emma said, looking up at Zara with bewildered eyes. Why would he risk his life like that? It was a question Zara couldn't answer, at least not yet. Instead, she took their hands in hers and spoke of practical things: clean clothes, hot food, and the reunion with their parents that would happen once the doctor had examined them. Outside the boarding house, the town buzzed with excitement and relief. The third girl, young Beth Wilson, was already home with her family. The sheriff and his deputy had ridden out with Tucker to recover the bodies and any stolen goods the Blackwater Gang might have accumulated. By nightfall, Zara found herself standing on the small balcony outside her room, watching the street below. The town had settled into an uneasy quiet, punctuated occasionally by raised voices from the saloon. She couldn't sleep, her mind filled with images of blood-soaked shirts and the haunted eyes of the rescued girls. The sound of horses made her lean forward. In the moonlight, she could make out Tucker Alderson riding beside the sheriff, both men looking bone-weary. They stopped outside the sheriff's office, exchanged a few words, and then parted ways. To her surprise, Tucker headed not toward the hotel or the saloon, but toward the small church at the end of the street. She watched as he dismounted, tied his horse to the hitching post, and disappeared inside the darkened building. Without quite knowing why, Zara threw a shawl over her nightdress and quietly made her way downstairs and out into the night. The church door creaked slightly as she pushed it open. The only light came from a few candles near the altar, casting long shadows across the empty pews. Tucker sat in the back row, his hat resting on the bench beside him, his head bowed. "Mr. Alderson," she called softly. He looked up, not seeming particularly surprised to see her. "Miss Thomas." "I saw you come in," she explained, moving down the aisle toward him. You thought perhaps I needed saving." A hint of wryness touched his voice. "I thought perhaps you needed company," she corrected gently. Tucker studied her for a long moment, then nodded to the space beside him. Zara sat, leaving a respectable distance between them. "The girls are resting at Mrs. Hollister's," she said. "Their parents are with them now." "Good." His voice was rough with exhaustion. "That's good." "What you did was remarkable, Mr. Alderson." He shook his head slightly. "It wasn't remarkable, it was necessary. Most men would have waited for a posse. Most men didn't see those girls being dragged away." His hands tightened into fists on his knees. "I was coming back from my ranch when I saw them on the ridge. Too far to shoot, too far to stop them, so I followed." "For 2 days," Zara said softly. "They weren't hard to track. Overconfident men leave clear trails." He finally turned to look at her fully. "Why are you here, Miss Thomas?" The directness of the question caught her off guard, but Zara had never been one to shy away from truth. "I'm not entirely sure. I suppose I wanted to make certain you were all right. I've had worse days." The ghost of a smile crossed his face. In the candlelight, she could see he'd washed away the blood, though his shirt was still stained with it. "And I wanted to thank you," she continued. "Emma and Kate Taylor are my students. What happened to them? I can't bear to think about it." "Nothing happened to them," Tucker said firmly. "Not in the way you're thinking. I got there in time." Relief washed over her. "Thank God. If you're inclined to thank anyone, I suppose he's a good choice." Tucker looked toward the altar. "I'm not much for praying these days, but it seemed right to come here tonight. To give thanks for your safe return, to remember that even in a world where men take innocent girls, there's still something worth believing in." He ran a hand through his dark hair, streaked with premature silver at the temples. "I'm not making much sense. It's been a long few days." "You're making perfect sense," Zara said, surprising herself by placing her hand briefly over his. She withdrew it quickly, remembering herself. I should return to the boarding house. Mrs. Hollister will have my hide if she discovers I've snuck out to meet a man in the church, of all places. That earned a real smile from Tucker, transforming his solemn face into something unexpectedly handsome. I wouldn't want to damage your reputation, Miss Thomas. My reputation has survived worse, I assure you. She stood, smoothing her nightdress beneath her shawl. Will you be staying in town? For a day or two, my ranch can manage without me while I give my statement to the judge when he arrives. Zara nodded. Then perhaps I'll see you again before you leave. I expect you will. There was something in his voice, a certainty, a promise that made her heart beat just a little faster. Good night, Mr. Alderson. Tucker, he said as she turned to go. My name is Tucker. She looked back at him, this blood-stained cowboy who had ridden alone into danger to save 3 girls he barely knew. Good night, Tucker, I'm Zara. I know who you are, Miss Thomas. Again, that ghost of a smile. Everyone knows the Boston schoolteacher who's not afraid to speak her mind. Heat rose to her cheeks. Is that what they say about me? Among other things, all good, I assure you. Good night, then, she repeated, flustered in a way she hadn't been since she was a schoolgirl herself. As she slipped back to the boarding house through the quiet streets, Zara realized she was smiling. It seemed almost wrong to find any joy on such a day, but there it was nonetheless, a small flicker of something warm in her chest, like one of the church candles had lodged itself between her ribs. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of crisp autumn day that made the Rocky Mountains shine like sapphires against the sky. Zara rose early, dressing in her best blue dress, not for any particular reason, she told herself, just because it seemed a day for wearing something cheerful. The Taylor girls were still sleeping when she checked on them, their parents keeping vigil in chairs pulled up beside the bed. Mrs. Taylor gave Zara a weary smile. The doctor says they'll be fine, she whispered. No lasting harm done thanks to that Alderson man, Zara nodded. I'm glad to hear it. Please tell them I'll visit later. Outside, the town had returned to its normal rhythms, though with an undercurrent of excitement. People gathered in small groups, no doubt discussing yesterday's events. Zara made her way to the small schoolhouse at the edge of town, needing the comfort of her books and papers and the ordinary tasks of preparing lessons. She had just unlocked the door when she heard hoofbeats behind her. Turning, she saw Tucker approaching on his bay gelding, looking more presentable than he had the night before in a clean shirt and with his face freshly shaved. Miss Thomas, he called, tipping his hat. Zara, he corrected himself, his voice carrying a hint of uncertainty that seemed at odds with the confident man she'd met in the church. Good morning, Tucker, she replied, feeling strangely shy. You look much improved without all the blood. A chuckle escaped him. I imagine so. He dismounted, tying his horse to the schoolyard fence. I hope I'm not interrupting your work. Not at all, I was just opening up. She hesitated, then added, Would you like to come in? I was going to make coffee. He nodded, following her into the one-room schoolhouse with its neat rows of desks and the large blackboard across the front wall. Zara busied herself with the small stove in the corner, aware of Tucker examining the room with interest. It's been a long time since I was in a place like this, he remarked, running his fingers along the edge of her desk. Were you a good student? She asked, measuring coffee grounds into the pot. Terrible, he admitted with a smile. Too restless, wanted to be outside. And now you have your ranch, she glanced at him over her shoulder. Though I confess I don't know much about it, you're something of a mystery in town, Mr. Alderson. Not much to know. I have a small spread about 10 miles north, cattle mostly, a few horses. He leaned against her desk, crossing his arms. What about you? What brought a Boston lady all the way to Colorado? Zara added water to the coffee pot and set it on the stove before answering. Adventure, I suppose, a chance to build something of my own. No husband waiting back east. She shook her head. No husband anywhere. I was engaged once, but She paused, searching for the right words. He expected me to be someone I'm not. Tucker nodded, as if this made perfect sense to him. Men often make that mistake with women. And what about you? She asked, brave in the morning light in a way she hadn't been in the candlelit church. No wife waiting at your ranch, a shadow crossed his face. I had a wife once and a daughter. Influenza took them both 6 years ago. I'm sorry, Zara said softly, truly. He acknowledged her sympathy with a slight nod. It's why I came west. Couldn't bear to stay in the house where they'd lived, couldn't bear to leave it either. The only solution was to go somewhere completely different. The coffee began to bubble, filling the schoolhouse with its rich aroma. Zara poured 2 cups, handing one to Tucker. And has it helped? She asked. Being somewhere different, he considered the question, blowing gently on his coffee before taking a sip. Some days more than others. They drank in companionable silence for a moment. Through the windows, Zara could see the town coming fully to life, people moving purposefully along the street. I should tell you, Tucker said finally. I didn't come by chance. I wanted to ask you something. Oh, Zara set her cup down, suddenly nervous without knowing why. The judge arrives tomorrow to take statements about what happened with the Blackwater Gang. The Taylor girls will need to testify. Understanding dawned on her. You think I should be there with them? He nodded. They trust you. It might be easier for them with you present. Of course I'll come, she said immediately. Though I'm not family, you're their teacher, Tucker interrupted gently. In a small town like this, that counts for almost the same thing. The warmth in his eyes as he said it made something flutter in Zara's chest. What time should I be at the courthouse? 10 o'clock. He drained his cup and set it down. And afterward, I was wondering if you might join me for dinner at the hotel restaurant. Zara blinked, caught off guard by the invitation. Dinner. A faint tinge of color appeared on Tucker's tan cheeks. If you'd rather not, no, she said quickly. That is, yes, I would like that. She smoothed her skirt, feeling suddenly flustered. I just wasn't expecting. Neither was I, Tucker admitted with a rueful smile. But yesterday reminded me that life is unpredictable and often shorter than we'd like. Seems foolish to waste time being cautious. Before Zara could respond, the schoolhouse door swung open and a group of children tumbled in, stopping short when they saw Tucker standing by the teacher's desk. Good morning, children, Zara said, recovering her composure. You remember Mr. Alderson. The children nodded wide-eyed. One small boy stepped forward. My pa says you killed all the bad men who took the Taylor girls, he said bluntly. Is that true? Tucker looked uncomfortable. Your pa shouldn't be discussing such things with you. But did you? The boy persisted. Tucker glanced at Zara, then back to the child. I did what needed doing to bring those girls home safe, he said carefully. That's all that matters. Another child, a girl of about 10, stepped forward. My mama says you're a hero. Now Tucker looked genuinely embarrassed. Your mama is kind but mistaken. I'm just a rancher who happened to be in the right place. Zara intervened, clapping her hands gently. Children, please take your seats. We have lessons to begin. She turned to Tucker with an apologetic smile. I'm afraid duty calls, he nodded, reaching for his hat. Tomorrow then, 10 o'clock at the courthouse, and dinner after, she confirmed, lowering her voice slightly. The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. I'll look forward to it. As he left, the children immediately burst into excited whispers. Zara tapped her ruler on the desk. That's quite enough of that, she said firmly. Open your readers to page 43. But as she began the day's lessons, her mind kept wandering to the tall rancher with the sad eyes and unexpected smile. Tomorrow couldn't come quickly enough. The courthouse in Willow Springs was really just the second floor of the town hall, a sturdy brick building that also housed the mayor's office and the land registry. By 9:45 the next morning, it was packed with townspeople eager to hear the official account of what had happened in the hills. Zara arrived early, wearing her most respectable gray dress with a high collar and a cameo brooch her grandmother had given her. She found the Taylor family huddled near the front, the 2 girls pale but composed in their Sunday best. Miss Thomas, Kate Taylor said with obvious relief. You came. Of course I did, Zara replied, taking a seat beside them. How are you both feeling today? Better, Emma said softly. The nightmares aren't as bad when we're together. Kate nodded agreement. And knowing those men can't hurt anyone else helps too. Before Zara could respond, a murmur ran through the crowd. Tucker had entered, accompanied by the sheriff. He wore a dark suit that fit him well enough to suggest it wasn't the first time he'd worn it, though perhaps it had been a while. His eyes found Zara immediately, and he offered a small nod that somehow felt more intimate than a public embrace. The judge, a portly man with impressive whiskers and an even more impressive voice, called the proceedings to order. The sheriff gave his report first, describing how Tucker had ridden into town with the three girls and then led lawmen back to the site where the Blackwater Gang had met their end. "And you found all four men dead," the judge clarified. "Yes, Your Honor," the sheriff replied. "Each shot clean through, professional work." Tucker was called next. He stood straight and spoke clearly, his voice carrying to every corner of the crowded room. "I was returning from Silver Creek when I saw the gang on the ridge, heading east with the girls. I recognized Dallas Blackwater from wanted posters. I tracked them into the hills to an abandoned mining cabin near Eagle Pass." "And then what happened?" the judge prompted. Tucker's eyes flickered briefly to the Taylor girls. "I waited until nightfall. They had set a guard, but he was drinking heavily. I took him out silently, then entered the cabin." The room was utterly silent now, every person leaning forward slightly. The girls were tied up in the corner. "The three remaining men were playing cards. I called them out." Tucker's voice remained steady, matter-of-fact. "Dallas drew first. I shot him, then the other two as they reached for their guns. 3 armed men, and you shot all of them before any could get a shot off." The judge sounded skeptical. A tight smile crossed Tucker's face. "I was a sharpshooter in the war, Your Honor, and they were drunk," the judge harumphed. "The Taylor girls and Beth Wilson will need to confirm your account." Kate Taylor stood before being called, her slender frame shaking slightly but her voice clear. "Everything Mr. Alderson said is true, Your Honor. Those men took us while we were picking berries at the edge of town. They kept saying they would." She swallowed hard. "They said they would have fun with us once they reached their hideout, then sell us to a man they knew in New Mexico." A collective gasp went through the room. Mrs. Taylor began to weep quietly. "But they never touched us that way," Kate continued quickly. "They were waiting until they reached somewhere safer. And then Mr. Alderson came, just like he said. We heard shouting, then gunshots. It happened so fast." Emma stood beside her sister. "He cut us free and got us on his horse. He gave us water and his coat because it was cold. He saved us." Beth Wilson, seated with her parents across the aisle, nodded vigorously in agreement. The judge nodded solemnly. "Based on the evidence and testimony presented, I find that Tucker Alderson acted in defense of innocent lives and in accordance with the laws of the Colorado Territory. The deaths of Dallas Blackwater, James Blackwater, Frank Taylor, and William Reed are ruled justified homicides. This matter is closed." He banged his gavel, and the tension in the room broke like a fever. People began talking all at once, many moving to congratulate Tucker or express their relief to the girls' families. Zara remained seated, watching as Tucker endured the backslapping and handshakes with stoic patience. When he finally extracted himself from the crowd and made his way to her, his expression was one of profound relief. "That's over, at least," he said quietly, offering his arm. "Shall we find somewhere quieter?" Zara placed her hand on his arm, feeling the solid strength beneath the suit jacket. "I believe you promised me dinner, though it's barely noon." "A late lunch, then," he amended with a smile. "The hotel restaurant should be quiet now that everyone's here at the courthouse." They slipped out while the crowd was still buzzing with excitement, walking the short distance to Willow Springs' only hotel, a 3-story building with modest but clean accommodations and a small restaurant that served decent food by frontier standards. The dining room was indeed nearly empty. A waiter led them to a table by the window where sunlight streamed in across the white tablecloth. "I want to thank you," Tucker said once they were seated, "for being there for those girls today. It couldn't have been easy for them." "They're stronger than they look," Zara replied. "Young women often are." Tucker studied her with those thoughtful eyes that seemed to see more than most. "You speak from experience," Zara smiled slightly. "Perhaps, Boston society has its own dangers, though admittedly not as dramatic as Outlaws in the Hills. "Tell me about it," he invited, leaning forward slightly. "Your life before Colorado," so she did, as they ate roast beef and potatoes and apple pie for dessert. She told him about growing up the daughter of a professor, about her passion for books and learning, about her brief engagement to a banker's son who couldn't understand why she wanted to teach rather than simply be a wife. "He said teaching was a temporary amusement until I found a husband," she concluded with a wry smile. "When I disagreed, he suggested perhaps I should reconsider my priorities." "Fool," Tucker said simply. Zara laughed. "That's what my father said too. He supported my decision to break the engagement and later to come west." "And your mother?" "She died when I was 12. Consumption." Zara twisted her napkin slightly. "Father raised me alone after that." Tucker nodded, understanding in his eyes. "And now you're here, shaping young minds in Willow Springs." "Now I'm here," she agreed. "Though I admit I didn't expect quite this much excitement when I accepted the position." They talked for hours, the afternoon sun sliding across the sky as they shared stories and discovered common ground. Tucker told her about his ranch, about his dreams of expanding it someday, about the quiet satisfaction he found in honest work. He spoke briefly of his time in the war, of the skills he'd learned that had allowed him to save the Taylor girls, but didn't dwell on those darker memories. "Would you like to see it sometime?" he asked as the waiter cleared away their coffee cups. "My ranch, I mean." The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications beyond a simple visit. "I would," Zara said softly, "very much." A week later, on a Saturday morning crisp with the promise of approaching winter, Tucker arrived at the boarding house with a buggy. Zara was waiting, dressed in a practical riding skirt and jacket, her hair pinned neatly beneath a small hat. "You look lovely," Tucker said, helping her up into the buggy seat. Zara smiled, settling her skirts around her. "Thank you. I've been looking forward to this." The drive to Tucker's ranch took just over an hour, the road winding through stands of aspen trees already turned golden with autumn. They talked easily, the initial awkwardness between them having melted away during their lunch and several subsequent encounters in town. "There it is," Tucker said finally, pointing ahead to where the road curved around a hillside. "Alderson Ranch." It wasn't a large operation, but it was well maintained. A neat white farmhouse stood surrounded by several outbuildings and corrals. A barn painted traditional red stood to one side, and beyond stretched fenced pastures where cattle grazed. The Rocky Mountains rose majestically in the background, framing the scene like a painting. "It's beautiful," Zara said honestly. "So peaceful." Tucker smiled, a hint of pride in his expression. "I've put a lot of work into it these last few years." He drove the buggy into the yard and helped Zara down. An older man emerged from one of the outbuildings, wiping his hands on a rag. "Frank," Tucker called. "Come meet Miss Thomas." The man approached, removing his hat to reveal a bald head fringed with gray hair. "Madam," he said with a slight bow, "heard a lot about you." "Frank Martinez is my foreman," Tucker explained. "Runs things when I'm away." "A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Martinez," Zara said warmly. "Likewise, madam. Boss has been walking around with his head in the clouds since he met you." The foreman's weathered face creased with good humor. "Frank," Tucker warned, though without real heat. The older man chuckled. "I'll leave you to your tour, dinner at 6, like you said." As Frank retreated to the outbuildings, Tucker offered Zara his arm. "I apologize for him. He takes liberties after all these years." "I don't mind," Zara assured him. "It's nice to know I'm not the only one who's been thinking about things." Tucker's eyes softened. "No, you're definitely not." He showed her around the property, the barn with its horses and equipment, the vegetable garden that provided much of his food, the chicken coop where a dozen hens scratched contentedly. Finally, they approached the house itself. Tucker hesitated at the bottom of the porch steps. "I should tell you it's not fancy inside. I'm not much for decorating." "I'm not here to judge your curtains, Tucker," Zara said gently. That made him smile. He led her inside, through a tidy kitchen into a comfortable sitting room with a stone fireplace and solid, practical furniture. Bookshelves lined one wall, surprising Zara with their contents, not just practical manuals on ranching and hunting, but novels, history books, even poetry. "You read Whitman?" she asked, running her finger along the spine of leaves of grass. "When the nights get long," Tucker admitted. "Books keep good company in winter." Zara turned to him, seeing this solitary man in a new light. "You're full of surprises, Tucker Alderson." "Is that a good thing?" he asked, suddenly looking almost boyish in his uncertainty. "A very good thing," she assured him. They continued the tour, Tucker showing her the rest of the downstairs, a small study, a dining room, a pantry well stocked for winter. He paused at the foot of the stairs. "The bedrooms are up there," he said. "Mine and, well, the one that was meant for my daughter, and a guest room." Zara heard what he didn't say, that he'd built this house with a family in mind, a family now gone. "It's a beautiful home, Tucker. Thank you for sharing it with me." They spent the afternoon walking the property, Tucker pointing out landmarks and sharing stories. By the time they returned to the house, the autumn sun was slanting low, and delicious smells were emanating from the kitchen. "Frank's an excellent cook," Tucker explained as they entered. "One of his many talents." The foreman had prepared a hearty meal of roast chicken, potatoes, and fresh bread. He joined them briefly, entertaining Zara with tales of the early days of the ranch before excusing himself to his own quarters in one of the outbuildings. After dinner, Tucker built a fire in the sitting room fireplace while Zara examined his bookshelves more thoroughly. "How did you come to have so many books out here?" she asked, selecting a volume of Tennyson's poems. Tucker added another log to the growing flames before answering. "My wife, Clara, loved to read. When we decided to come west, she insisted on bringing the books." He straightened, watching the fire catch. "After she died, I kept adding to the collection. Seemed like a way to honor her memory." Zara replaced the book carefully. "She must have been remarkable." "She was." Tucker turned to face her fully, the firelight casting his features into sharp relief. "She would have liked you, I think." Zara moved closer to the fire, warming her hands. "What was she like?" A sad smile touched Tucker's lips. "Strong, stubborn, full of life." He sat in one of the armchairs, gesturing for Zara to take the other. "She wanted adventure like you. That's why we came west, really. I would have been content to stay in Pennsylvania." "And your daughter?" Zara asked gently. "Lily. She was 4 when they died." "She had Clara's laugh and my stubbornness, according to her mother." His voice softened with the memory. "Sometimes I wonder what she would be like now. She'd be 10. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Tucker." Zara leaned forward, impulsively taking his hand. "Truly." His fingers closed around hers. "For a long time after they died, I was just existing, running the ranch, doing what needed doing, but not really living. And now," the question was barely a whisper. Tucker met her gaze, the firelight reflected in his eyes. "Now I'm remembering what it feels like to want things again. To think about possibilities." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken feelings. Zara found herself unable to look away from his face, from the warmth and hope and hesitation she saw there. "What kinds of possibilities?" she asked, her heart beating faster. Instead of answering with words, Tucker stood, gently pulling her to her feet. He moved slowly, giving her every chance to step away, but Zara stayed where she was, tilting her face up to his. The kiss, when it came, was gentle but not tentative. His lips were warm against hers, his hand coming up to cup her cheek with infinite care. Zara leaned into him, her own hands resting lightly on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. When they parted, Tucker rested his forehead against hers. "I haven't done that in a very long time," he murmured. "Neither have I," Zara admitted, a smile in her voice. "I think we managed well enough, though." That made him chuckle, the sound rumbling through his chest. "You're an extraordinary woman, Zara Thomas." "And you're a good man, Tucker Alderson." She stepped back slightly, though she kept hold of his hands. "A much better man than you give yourself credit for." They sat again, closer now, talking late into the evening as the fire burned down to embers. Tucker spoke more freely about his past, his childhood in Pennsylvania, his service during the war, his marriage to Clara, and their dreams of building a life in the West. Zara told him about her ambitions to someday start a proper school with multiple teachers, perhaps even a small college. Willow Springs is growing, she pointed out. In 10 years, it could be twice the size it is now, especially with the railroad. And is that where you see yourself, in Willow Springs, 10 years from now? Tucker's question seemed casual, but Zara heard the deeper query beneath it. I'm beginning to think so, she said carefully. There's a lot to recommend it. The clock on the mantel chimed 10, startling them both. It's getting late, Tucker said reluctantly. We should head back to town before it's full dark. Zara nodded, though part of her wished they could stay in this moment, in the warm circle of firelight, indefinitely. Yes, I suppose we should. The drive back to Willow Springs was quieter, both of them wrapped in their own thoughts. The buggy lanterns cast a golden glow on the road ahead, and above, stars pricked the vast Colorado sky like diamonds scattered on velvet. When they reached the boarding house, Tucker helped Zara down from the buggy, his hands lingering at her waist. Thank you for today, she said softly. For showing me your home. Thank you for coming. His voice was equally low. Perhaps next Saturday if you're free, Zara smiled. I'm free. He kissed her again, briefly but with unmistakable feeling, before helping her up the steps to the boarding house door. Good night, Zara. Good night, Tucker. As she watched him drive away, Zara touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. Something was beginning between them, something unexpected and wonderful, and a little frightening in its intensity. For a woman who had always prided herself on careful planning, this headlong rush of feeling was uncharted territory. Yet as she climbed the stairs to her room, Zara found she wasn't afraid. For the first time in her life, she was ready to let her heart lead the way. The weeks that followed took on a pattern. During the week, Zara taught her classes and Tucker tended his ranch. On Saturdays, he would come to town, sometimes taking her to dinner at the hotel, sometimes for rides in the surrounding countryside, and increasingly often back to his ranch. October gave way to November, and the first snow dusted the mountains. The Taylor girls returned to school, healing from their ordeal with the resilience of youth. Life in Willow Springs settled back into its rhythm, though Tucker Alderson was no longer the solitary figure on the edge of town events. Now he sat beside the schoolteacher at church socials, danced with her at the Thanksgiving celebration, brought her small gifts, a book of poetry, a pressed flower, a handkerchief he'd spotted in a traveling peddler's wares. The town noticed, of course. Small communities always do. But the general sentiment was approval. After what Tucker had done for the Taylor girls and young Beth Wilson, most folks agreed he deserved whatever happiness he could find. He smiles now, Mrs. Hollister observed one evening as Zara prepared for another Saturday outing. Before you, I don't think I ever saw that man smile. Zara blushed, adjusting her hat in the mirror. He has a nice smile, doesn't he? The older woman chuckled. That he does, and a good heart for all his solitary ways. You could do worse, my dear. We're just... Zara paused, unsure how to define what they were. Enjoying each other's company. Mrs. Hollister's knowing look said she understood perfectly well what that meant. Of course you are, and may I say, it's about time. A woman your age needs more than books for company. Before Zara could formulate a response to that, there was a knock at the door. Tucker had arrived, punctual as always. That day, he took her to a spot he'd discovered years ago, a small lake nestled in a valley, frozen now and gleaming like a mirror beneath the winter sun. They sat on a fallen log, wrapped in blankets against the cold, and watched as a herd of elk moved across the distant hillside. I've been thinking, Tucker said after a comfortable silence. A dangerous pastime, Zara teased. He smiled, nudging her shoulder gently with his. Be serious for a moment. Very well. She turned slightly to face him, noting the intent expression in his eyes. What have you been thinking about, the future? He took her gloved hand in his. Our future, specifically. Zara's heart began to race. Oh. I know it hasn't been very long, Tucker continued carefully. But at our age, perhaps that doesn't matter as much as it might for younger folks. What are you saying, Tucker? Zara held her breath, hardly daring to hope he meant what she thought he might. He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. I'm saying that I love you, Zara Thomas. I didn't expect to love anyone again after Clara, but here we are. He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring with a small diamond. "I'm asking if you would consider becoming my wife." Joy bloomed in Zara's chest, so intense it was almost painful. "Yes," she said immediately. "Yes, I will." Tucker's face lit with such happiness that Zara thought her heart might burst from witnessing it. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that expressed everything words couldn't: his love, his gratitude, his promise. When they finally parted, breathless and laughing, Zara rested her head on his shoulder. "I love you too, you know. I should have said that first." "You said the most important word first," Tucker replied, his arm tightening around her. "Yes" was all I needed to hear. They sat by the frozen lake until the winter sun began to sink toward the horizon, making plans for their shared future. They would marry in the spring, after the worst of the winter weather had passed. Zara would finish the school year, then move to the ranch. Perhaps someday they would build a larger school in town, as she had dreamed. "And perhaps," Tucker said hesitantly, "if you wanted, we might think about children. I know I'm older, but I would like that," Zara interrupted softly. "Very much." The look he gave her then was so full of love that Zara felt tears prick her eyes. This was not the life she had imagined when she came west. It was better, richer, more complex and beautiful than anything she could have planned. As they drove back to town, the engagement ring a new weight on her finger. Zara thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. If Tucker hadn't happened to see the Blackwater Gang that day, if he hadn't followed them into the hills, if he hadn't returned with 3 girls and blood on his shirt, none of this would have happened. Out of violence and fear had come love and hope. It seemed impossible, yet here they were, building a future together one day at a time. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Willow Springs. Most people were delighted, offering congratulations and well wishes. A few expressed surprise at the schoolteacher's choice of the solitary rancher, but even they had to admit the couple seemed genuinely happy together. Winter settled over Colorado in earnest, bringing heavy snows that sometimes made the road between town and Tucker's ranch impassable. On those days, Zara would watch from her classroom window, hoping to see his familiar figure approaching on horseback. Tucker, for his part, made the journey whenever possible, often staying at the small hotel in town rather than risking the return trip in bad weather. They spent Christmas together, joining the town's celebration at the church and then sharing a quiet dinner at the hotel. Tucker gave Zara a delicate gold locket containing a small portrait of himself, which she immediately put on and rarely removed thereafter. Zara gave him a fine new saddle blanket she had secretly been working on for weeks, embroidered with his initials. As winter began to loosen its grip, and the first hints of spring appeared in the mountains, wedding preparations began in earnest. The ceremony would be held in the church, followed by a celebration at the town hall. Everyone in Willow Springs seemed involved in some way, the women helping with Zara's dress, the men assisting Tucker in building additional furniture for the ranch house, the children practicing songs to sing at the reception. 2 weeks before the wedding, as Zara was closing the schoolhouse for the day, she heard the now familiar sound of Tucker's horse approaching. She stepped outside with a smile which quickly faded when she saw his expression. "What's wrong?" she asked as he dismounted. Tucker's face was grim. "There's trouble. The younger brother of Dallas Blackwater arrived in the area. He's been asking questions about what happened to his brother and cousins." Zara's hand went to her throat. "Does he know it was you?" "Not yet, as far as I can tell, but it won't take long for someone to talk." Tucker ran a hand through his hair. "The sheriff thinks he's dangerous, said he's got a reputation down in New Mexico." "What are you going to do?" Zara asked, fear coiling in her stomach. "For now, be careful. Keep my eyes open." Tucker tried to smile reassuringly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The sheriff's deputized a few men to keep watch. With luck, this Blackwater will realize there's nothing to be gained here and move on." But luck, it seemed, was not on their side. 3 days later, as Zara was walking home from school, a stranger stepped out from between 2 buildings, blocking her path. "Miss Thomas," he said, his voice low and rough. "The schoolteacher." He was a tall man, lean and hard-looking, with the same dark hair and eyes that Dallas Blackwater had possessed in the wanted posters Zara had seen. She took a step back, clutching her books to her chest. "Yes," she answered, seeing no point in lying. "Can I help you?" "I hear you're engaged to Tucker Alderson." The man, she was certain now this was the younger Blackwater, smiled unpleasantly. "The man who killed my brother. Mr. Alderson did what was necessary to save 3 innocent girls," Zara said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Your brother and his gang were going to sell them." Blackwater's eyes narrowed. "That's his story. It's the truth. The girls testified to it." Zara glanced around, hoping to see anyone nearby, but the street was momentarily empty. The judge ruled it justified. "I don't much care what some territorial judge thinks," Blackwater said, stepping closer. "My brother's dead and someone's going to pay for that." Before he could say more, a voice called out from across the street. "Miss Thomas, there you are." It was Mrs. Wilson, Beth's mother, hurrying toward them with a basket on her arm. Blackwater stepped back, touching the brim of his hat in a mockery of politeness. "Think about what I said, Miss Thomas, and tell your fiancé I'll be seeing him soon." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing around a corner before Mrs. Wilson reached Zara's side. "Who was that man?" Mrs. Wilson asked, frowning. "He looked unsavory." "No one of consequence," Zara lied, her heart still racing. "Just asking directions." But as soon as she could excuse herself, Zara hurried to the sheriff's office. The lawman listened to her account with growing concern. "I'll send someone to find Alderson," he said when she finished. "You should stay here until we locate him." It was nearly an hour before Tucker arrived, his face tight with worry. He gathered Zara into his arms the moment he saw her. "Are you all right?" he demanded, holding her at arm's length to examine her. "Did he hurt you?" "I'm fine," she assured him. "He just wanted to frighten me and you." The sheriff cleared his throat. "This changes things, Alderson. Threatening your fiancé crosses a line." Tucker nodded grimly. "It does at that." He turned to Zara. "I want you to stay at the boarding house. Don't go anywhere alone." "And what will you do?" she asked, already suspecting the answer. "Find Blackwater before he finds me." The sheriff shook his head. "That's my job, Alderson. Let the law handle this." But Zara could see in Tucker's eyes that he had no intention of standing aside while a threat to their future remained. She gripped his arm. "Promise me you won't do anything reckless," she pleaded softly. "We're getting married in 11 days. Something in her voice seemed to reach him. His expression softened. "I promise, but I won't let him hurt you or anyone else in this town." The sheriff assigned a deputy to escort Zara back to the boarding house and to remain nearby. Tucker reluctantly agreed to return to his ranch, but only after extracting a promise from the sheriff to send word immediately if Blackwater made another appearance. That night, Zara couldn't sleep. She stood at her window, looking out at the quiet streets of Willow Springs, thinking about the man who had threatened her. Would he really try to harm Tucker, or had it been empty words, the bluster of a grieving brother? Morning brought no answers, but it did bring Tucker, riding into town earlier than usual. He came straight to the boarding house where Zara was just finishing breakfast. "I've been thinking," he said without preamble. "We should move the wedding up." Zara blinked in surprise. "Move it up?" "But everything's arranged for next week." "I know." Tucker took her hands in his. "But I can't shake the feeling that waiting is dangerous. Blackwater is unpredictable. If we were already married, I could keep you safe at the ranch." "Tucker," Zara said gently, "I'm not going to let fear dictate when we marry, and I'm certainly not going to let Joel Blackwater rob us of the wedding we've planned." He sighed, pressing his forehead to hers. "I knew you'd say that. You're the stubbornest woman I've ever known, Zara Thomas." "And soon to be the stubbornest Alderson," she reminded him with a small smile. "Have faith, Tucker. The sheriff is watching for Blackwater. The whole town is on alert." "I know," he said again, "but I won't rest easy until this is resolved." They spent the day together, neither willing to let the other out of sight for long. Tucker accompanied Zara to the schoolhouse, where she needed to prepare lessons for her substitute, who would take over during their honeymoon. Later, they visited the church to discuss final arrangements with the pastor. As twilight fell, Tucker walked Zara back to the boarding house. I'll stay in town tonight, he told her. At the hotel, be careful, Zara said, suddenly reluctant to part from him. Promise me, always. He kissed her softly, then more deeply, as if trying to reassure them both that everything would be all right. But as Zara watched him walk toward the hotel, a chill ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the evening air. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Zara dressed quickly, eager to meet Tucker for breakfast as they had planned. But when she reached the hotel dining room, he wasn't there. Mr. Alderson, the desk clerk repeated when she inquired. He went out very early, madam, before sunrise, said something about checking with the sheriff. Unease growing, Zara made her way to the sheriff's office. The lawman looked up in surprise when she entered. Miss Thomas, what can I do for you? I'm looking for Tucker, she said. The hotel clerk said he came to see you this morning. The sheriff frowned. I haven't seen him today. Cold fear gripped Zara's heart. Then where is he? The answer came just as the words left her mouth. A shot rang out from somewhere on the outskirts of town, followed by another. Then silence. For a moment, no one moved. Then the sheriff was on his feet, grabbing his gun belt. Stay here, he ordered Zara, but she was already moving toward the door. That was Tucker's rifle, she said with certainty. She had heard him fire it enough times at the ranch to recognize its distinctive report. I'm coming with you, the sheriff knew better than to argue. Stay behind me. They hurried through town, other citizens joining them as word spread. The shots had come from the northern edge of Willow Springs, near the stables where visitors kept their horses. What they found there stopped them all in their tracks. Joel Blackwater lay face down in the dirt, a dark stain spreading across the back of his shirt. A few yards away, Tucker was slumped against a hitching post, one hand pressed to his side where blood seeped between his fingers. Tucker, Zara cried, rushing forward. He looked up, pain etched in his features but relief in his eyes when he saw her. You're safe, he murmured. Good. The sheriff knelt beside Blackwater, checking for signs of life. He's dead, he announced, then moved to Tucker's side. What happened, Alderson? Tucker grimaced as Zara pressed her handkerchief to his wound. He was waiting for me when I came to get my horse, said he was going to kill me, then go after Zara. His breathing was labored but steady. Drew on me, I was faster. Someone get the doctor. Zara called, her voice cracking with fear. Now, people scattered to follow her order. The sheriff helped Tucker to his feet, supporting him as they made their slow way toward the doctor's office. Is it bad? Zara asked, walking on Tucker's other side, still pressing the rapidly reddening handkerchief to his ribs. I've had worse, Tucker said, though his face was pale beneath his tan. Bullet went clean through, I think. Don't you dare make light of this, Tucker Alderson, Zara said fiercely, tears threatening. Don't you dare. His lips quirked in a pained smile. Wouldn't dream of it, madam. The doctor was already waiting when they arrived, his instruments laid out. He shooed everyone except Zara from the room at Tucker's insistence, then set to work examining the wound. You're a lucky man, Alderson, he said after a thorough investigation. Bullet missed anything vital, clean entry and exit. He began cleaning the wound. You'll be sore for a while and you've lost some blood, but with rest and care you should heal just fine. Zara sagged with relief, clutching Tucker's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. Does this mean I can still get married next week? Tucker asked, wincing as the doctor began stitching the wound. The doctor chuckled. If you don't overexert yourself between now and then, yes. Zara gave a watery laugh, as if I'd let him. Once Tucker was bandaged and resting comfortably on the doctor's examination table, the sheriff returned to take his official statement. The story was straightforward. Blackwater had been lying in wait, intent on revenge. He had drawn first, declaring his intention to kill not only Tucker but Zara as well. Tucker had defended himself with deadly accuracy. It's a clear case of self-defense, the sheriff concluded. I'll wire the judge, but there won't be any charges. Tucker nodded wearily. Good. I've had enough excitement for one lifetime. The sheriff departed, and Zara sat beside Tucker, gently stroking his hair back from his forehead. You promised not to do anything reckless, she reminded him softly. I didn't seek him out, Tucker defended himself. He found me. You went to the stables alone at dawn, knowing he was in town. Zara's voice trembled slightly. That sounds reckless to me. Tucker had the grace to look sheepish. I thought I'd ride out to the ranch, check on things, and be back before you woke up. Next time, wake me up. Zara leaned down to kiss him gently. I'd rather lose sleep than lose you. The doctor insisted Tucker stay in town for at least 2 days, resting at the hotel under Zara's watchful eye. Word spread quickly about the confrontation and its outcome. Most townsfolk were relieved that the threat had been eliminated, though there was general agreement that it was a sorry business all around. By the day before the wedding, Tucker was moving more easily, the pain in his side reduced to a dull ache. The doctor pronounced him fit for the ceremony, though with a stern warning against excessive enthusiasm during the honeymoon that made both Tucker and Zara blush furiously. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, as if nature itself approved of the union. The small church was filled to capacity, with some guests standing at the back. Zara wore a dress of ivory silk, simpler than what might have been fashionable in Boston but perfect for a teacher's wedding in a frontier town. Tucker, despite his injury, cut a handsome figure in his dark suit, standing straight and proud at the altar as he waited for his bride. When Zara appeared at the church door, a hush fell over the congregation. She walked alone down the aisle. Her father had been too ill to make the journey from Boston, but she didn't feel lonely. Not with Tucker watching her approach, his eyes filled with a love so tangible it seemed to light her path. "Dearly beloved," the pastor began, and Zara felt her heart soar. After everything, the violence, the fear, the uncertainty, they had arrived at this moment. Together. The vows were traditional, spoken with clear voices that carried to every corner of the church. When Tucker slipped the gold band onto Zara's finger to join her engagement ring, his hand was steady. When Zara placed a matching band on his finger, her smile was radiant. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the pastor declared. "You may kiss your bride." Tucker's kiss was gentle but full of promise when they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Alderson. The church erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration at the town hall afterward was joyous. Children sang the songs they had practiced. Tables groaned with food prepared by the women of the community. There was dancing, though Tucker was careful not to overexert himself, and speeches and toasts to the happy couple. As evening approached, they slipped away to the hotel, where they would spend one night before traveling to Denver for a proper honeymoon. In their room, with the door closed against the world, Tucker took Zara in his arms. "Mrs. Alderson," he murmured against her hair. "I like the sound of that." "So do I," Zara replied, tilting her face up for his kiss. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Tucker traced patterns on Zara's bare shoulder. "I never thought I'd find this again," he said softly. "After Clara and Lily died, I thought that part of my life was over." Zara propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at her husband's face in the moonlight streaming through the window. "I never thought I'd find it at all," she admitted. "I came west for adventure, for independence. I wasn't looking for love." Tucker smiled, pulling her down for another kiss. "The best things in life are often the ones we don't go looking for. Like 3 girls in the hills," Zara suggested. "Like a schoolteacher who isn't afraid to walk into a church at night to check on a blood-stained cowboy," Tucker countered. Zara laughed softly. "We make quite a pair, don't we?" "We do at that," Tucker agreed, his arms tightening around her. "And I wouldn't have it any other way." 1 year later, on a warm spring day, Tucker Alderson stood on the porch of his ranch house, watching a buggy approach along the winding road. Beside him, Zara held their infant son Thomas, born just 3 months earlier. "They're here," Tucker said, a smile spreading across his face. Zara nodded, adjusting the baby's blanket. "Right on time. Emma's always been punctual." The buggy drew closer, revealing Emma Taylor at the reins, with her sister Kate beside her and their parents in the back seat. They had come for Sunday dinner, a monthly tradition that had begun shortly after the wedding. As Tucker went to help their guests from the buggy, Zara looked out over the ranch, the fields greening with spring, the cattle grazing peacefully, the mountains standing sentinel in the distance. In the year since their marriage, the ranch had prospered. They had added more cattle, improved the house, hired 2 more hands to help Frank with the increasing workload. Willow Springs had grown too. The railroad had brought more settlers, more businesses. Zara had helped establish a proper school building with 2 classrooms instead of 1, though she had temporarily stepped back from teaching after Thomas's birth. She planned to return in the fall, with Mrs. Wilson helping to care for the baby during school hours. Miss Emma. Tucker called cheerfully. "You're handling those reins like a professional these days." Emma, now 19 and blossoming into a confident young woman, beamed at the compliment. "Mr. Alderson taught me well," she replied, referring to the riding lessons Tucker had given her over the past year. The nightmare of her abduction had faded with time, though neither she nor Kate would ever forget it entirely. But they had healed, as young people do, and found their way forward. Kate was being courted by the new telegraph operator, a serious young man with kind eyes. Emma was planning to attend a teaching college in Denver in the fall, inspired by Zara's example. As they all moved inside for dinner, Zara caught Tucker's eye across the room. He winked at her, that private signal that had come to mean so much between them. "I see you. I love you. I'm grateful for this life we've built." Later, after their guests had departed and Thomas was sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Tucker and Zara sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "I was thinking," Zara said, leaning into her husband's side, "about fate." "Oh." Tucker's arm tightened around her shoulders. "What about it? How strange it is, the paths that lead us to where we're meant to be." She looked up at him. "If the Blackwater Gang hadn't taken those girls, if you hadn't been riding back from Silver Creek at that exact moment, if you hadn't come to check on a blood-stained cowboy in a church," Tucker added. "Exactly." Zara rested her head on his shoulder. "So many little chances, all leading to this." Tucker was quiet for a moment, contemplating. "I don't know that I believe in fate," he said finally. "But I do believe that good can come from terrible things if we're brave enough to keep going, to keep trying. Like a family born from the courage to begin again," Zara murmured, "like love found when neither of us was looking for it." Tucker kissed the top of her head. "I wouldn't change a thing, Zara. Not one moment of the path that brought me to you." As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared, they sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the soft sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Their story had begun in violence and fear, with outlaws taking 3 girls into the hills, with a cowboy bringing them back with blood on his shirt, but it had transformed into something beautiful, something lasting. And in the quiet of the evening, with his wife in his arms and his sons sleeping nearby, Tucker Alderson knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where he was meant to be. Not fate, perhaps, but the choice to follow those girls into the hills, the choice to bring them home, the choice to open his heart again when a stubborn schoolteacher walked into a church to check on him. Choices that had led to love, to family, to a future brighter than he could have imagined on that blood-soaked day 1 year before.